By the way, were you guys able to watch the previous recording on YouTube? Were you able to access it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's good. All right. So for today, we're gonna try and discuss two sections. So it's loops and selection statements, and the other one would be functions. Okay, there's three PowerPoints for functions. We'll try and finish the two PowerPoints today, but if we can't, we'll just continue next time. Okay, so the goal is for the five sessions that we have is we're gonna end up with Python pandas. So this is the goal that we have. Um, we should be able to finish this one in five sessions, and then after that, all the other sessions, all the other topics will be handled by Ma'am Shai and the one responsible for Power BI, right? Mm. All right. So, okay. All right. So loops in Python are programming constructs or um, blocks of code that allows you to repeat or execute um, a certain logic, right? If a certain condition is met for a certain number of iterations, all right? That's what we call it. Each repetition is called an iteration or a pass, all right? And there are two loops that is mm, two types of loops that are dominant. So it's definite iteration and indefinite iteration. So from the names itself, you can kind of guess what it means, right? So definite, there's a certain limit. Indefinite, there is no limit. Okay. It will stop until a condition is met. Definite, it will stop a certain number of times only. Okay. Or you can combine both of them. That's actually possible. All right. So why do we use loops? Because if you don't use loops, you're gonna need to write the same set of operations, same set of code that number of times, right? And it's not really efficient in the long run if you do it like that. There's a chat. So Dimpy can access it then. All right. So I hope you can access it soon at the YouTube. Okay. All right. So the first loop that we're gonna be learning is called the for loop, all right? And this loop is actually common in all other languages, not just in Python. It has different forms, but you know, it's still the same thing, the same logic, right? So a for loop is used to iterate over a sequence. So when you say sequence, there's a lot of different types of sequence in Python. So there are lists, there are tuples, strings is also a sequence, right? It is a sequence of characters, range, the range function, or anything that has items in a certain order, okay? Um, if we generalize that one, we can say that any iterable object, okay? So that's the general term for it. So it will execute a block of code for each item in that sequence, right? So here is the syntax for the for loop. So you start with the word for, next is the variable, Next is the keyword in, and then next is the sequence that you want to go over to. All right. And then after that are the statements or the blocks of code that you want to repeat for each item, right? So the first line of code is sometimes called the loop header. The rest of the code is sometimes called loop body. So depending on the material that you're learning, sometimes it's called like this, sometimes it's not. Um, if you just follow the syntax, it will just work. It will work just fine. Okay. Now, let's go and have an example, right? So it's nothing that complicated. All right. So start with what? A four. Next is a uh variable, right? Yeah, variable. So this can be any variable name. Okay. We discussed variables before, right? So this is the box that we want. We want the item for the certain sequence to be stored. Okay. So for now, I'm just gonna call this one temp or temporary. And then in, okay, that's the keyword. And then next is the sequence, any iterable object. So again, let's start with the most um, commonly used one, and it's the range function. Okay. So um, it may not seem like this is a sequence, but it actually makes sense when you understand its definition. But let's just use it for now, okay? Range of 4, for example, and then followed by a colon, okay? This is a function, but again, this is any iterable object. So we'll get to the other examples later on. First, let's focus on this function, right? And then after that, put a colon, right? And if you've observed, the moment I press enter, Python will automatically add a uh, one tab key here for the next line of code. So let's say if I want to say print and then whatever is inside of temp, right? So that's my code. Um, this will be printed out. Okay, this will be executed, this code, for each item in this sequence. Okay, all right. So let's just run this one so that we can see what it looks like. All right, so this is what the range function does, okay? It gives out numbers, okay, starting from 0 up until, but not including the number that you put here, okay, in steps of 1. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and then it stops, okay? That's what the range function is for, okay? It's used in a lot of things, really, like if you want something to repeat a certain number of times. This is what we use for. So if you've noticed, you can just say, I want to repeat this code 4 times. So you just put 4 there, okay? You don't need to think about temp anymore, okay? You can just say print um, Daniel, for example, my name, all right? And then run it. Okay, let's say in your mind, I want to print something 4 times. Then this is what you do. As you can see, I'm not even using the temp, right? The variable here. So it's just there because we want to satisfy the syntax in order for it to work. But you don't necessarily have to use it, okay? But if you do, then you can, of course. Um, so that's it for the for loop. Um, let's discuss a bit more what we can do with range, okay? So let's take a look at the range function. Range Python. All right, so it has the syntax. It has the start, stop, and step, right? So let's see. Mm, there's one that is required. So if you only have one number, it will automatically be the stop number. That's what we have here. So 4 is the stop number. It will stop there, right? Start is an integer specifying at which position to start. Default is 0. So that's why our value earlier was what? 0. The starting was 0. Okay. And then step optional, an integer number specifying the incrementation. So what is the next number that the range function will give out? Okay, so the default is 1. That's why we have uh 0, 1, 2, 3. It's increasing by 1 on each loop, right? So you can just play around with this. Let's say um you want to start at 5, you want it to end at 30, and then you want it to skip by 5 in steps of 5. You can do it like that. So just play around with the syntax. Again, if you've noticed, these things have no um let's see. So unless you indicate the names directly, right? You have to follow their order, okay? So it has to be start, stop, and step. You can't mix them up, right? Unless you actually have to um, specify that that number is for the start, this is for the stop, and this is for the step. But in order to not make it confusing, just follow this syntax, okay? Um, this sequence. So it will the first number is start, the second is stop, the third is step. Okay, the second is the one that's required. Okay, so if you only have one number, that is automatically the stop number. Okay, all right. So I hope that makes sense. If you only have two numbers, automatically that will be the start and stop. So if it's 5 and 30, if you run it, it will start at 5 and at 30, but not including 30 in steps of 1. So 5, 6, 7, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, I hope you understand what I meant when the range function will give out a sequence, right? Because this is literally just a sequence of numbers. Okay. So that's what it meant. So it can classify as a sequence as long as it works that way. Okay. So there are other functions that works the same way as the range um, that are used for different things, okay? But right now, let's just focus on the range. Random variable, yes, it is just a random variable that I made. This can be anything that I want. This can be X, this can be Y, any name that you give it, okay? Um, because right now we're just using range, right? It will make sense later if we use a different sequence, right? Let's say I have a list of students, right? So instead of X, I'm going to use for student in students. Okay, so I hope it makes sense. Let's have another example here. Okay, so something like this. Okay, for student in students or in class, for example. All right, no. Class 4. Okay. So for example, this is my for loop, all right? So it makes more sense, right? So class 4, and then for each student, right, it will be stored in this variable called student, right? So it's making more sense now that you're using actual sequences that have meaning, right? The range here doesn't have doesn't have meaning aside from just giving out a sequence of numbers that you specify. Okay, that's why I just called it temp earlier because it really is just a temporary number. I have no specific use for it right now, unless of course you give it a reason, right? Um, let's say you want the range function in skips of 2, for example. Okay, so I want it to start at 1, end at 20, and end 20. Okay, so 1 to 20, right? But I want to use these numbers in the former example. Ah, you mean this? You mean the one with the string? Okay, you meant this one. So you're confused why it understood that I wanted it to print out Daniel. This one. So this one, 110 range. Yeah. So as you can see, the temp there, right? It's just there to satisfy the syntax, right? I'm not really using it for anything. What I wanted to achieve was that I wanted to create a loop that prints out the word Daniel 4 times. That was my goal. All right. That's what I used that loop for. I wasn't using that um, loop to make use of the um, individual numbers that the sequence generated. All right. So, okay. So it seems that you're confused because I didn't use the temp. So let's just create one more example for everyone. Um, so let's use the same thing here. So for temp and range, right? So at the example at the top, I didn't use temp, right? Let's make use of temp. Let's say I want that temp to be, um, let's say I want this one to be my multiplier, all right? So I want to create a multiplication table from 1 to 21 multiplied by 9, all right? So I want to print something like this. Print uh 9 and then hmm, 9 times the what in temp, right? And then the actual value 9 times. All right, I forgot the equal sign. All right, uh, that is wrong. There we go. All right, so let's say that I wanted to make use of temp as my multiplier. So I wanted to create a multiplication table of 9 starting from 1 up to 20. All right. So in this case, I'm actually making use of the temp variable. Okay. So it depends on you what you wanted to use it for. All right. So I hope everyone understands this one. So that's it for the range function. And this is also the basics of for loop. So no matter how complicated it will get, it will always follow this syntax. Now let's get to the indentation, right? Now why this is important. So the way that um, grouping works in Python is that it follows the indentation, right? So this means that it has one indentation, right? This signifies that this code, right? Or if you have multiple blocks of code here, okay, for example, I'm just repeating it for the sake of having more lines. So as you can see, um, these lines of code, right, belong to what? They belong to the for loop. That's how grouping works in Python. And if you want to add something else inside, right? You can have a for loop inside of a for loop. So let's have another for loop inside here. Okay. Let's say, for example, you have another for loop. So you have another block of code. So in order to tell Python that the next block of code belongs to this for loop, right? You have to put another indentation, right? And let's say you're done, right? So if you want the next code to belong to this for loop, right? You have to go back one indentation to the left, okay? So something like this, okay? So these blocks of code belong to this for loop. These blocks of code belong to this for loop, all right? And then these also belong here. But this entire for loop, right, belongs to this one, all right? So it's the way that the hierarchy works. It's using tab as a way to indicate the hierarchy of the code, the groupings of the code, okay? So that's the importance of indentation in Python. So it's very easy to actually make a mistake on this one. Um, In other languages, you have to actually specify there's a certain character that you have to use to indicate groupings, all right? Some people find that one easier. Some people find this one easier. Uh, Actually, this is much cleaner to look at. Um, and it forces you to create readable code because it will automatically create an error. Um, when you're using characters for groupings, like, right? Sometimes you will end up with something like this, for example, if you're using other languages, okay? So it can get messy because there's no indentation anymore, okay? So the only thing that you will see are characters. Of course, they can put indentation if they want. Actually, that's what is recommended. But let's say that the termination key is open and close curly braces, for example. Okay, like that. And that is the termination for the groupings, okay? So it can get quite messy, especially if you're having um multiple levels of nesting, okay? So we call that a nest. Each succeeding group, okay, something like this. Okay. Um, let's see. So let's have an example of what it looks like. So I created it does that. Why does it do that? Right. Um, okay. So if I were to remove this tab here, all right, if I were to run this code, it will print out indentation error. Okay. But let's try and see what would happen if we were to add something else. So print, let's say indentation. Okay, so now I have two lines of code for this for loop, right? So if I try to run this one, it will print out. Hmm, hmm, let's paste it here. That was weird. Okay. So I have two lines of code now, and let's just make this one simpler. I want this one to repeat 5 times. Okay, so Daniel indentation, right? Let's say I want um to remove the indentation this in this part, okay? I want to remove this one from the for loop. So all I have to do is delete the indentation. And then automatically it will print out five lineals and then one indentation. Okay, you see, because this only belongs to the for loop, right? So Python has to finish this part of the code first before going to the next line, which is this one. Okay, so this is only executed once because it's only one line of code. This is executed five times because it is inside of the for loop. I hope you guys understand from this example the importance of indentation. All right, and this goes for um, the succeeding discussions that we will have in other control structures and in other topics as well. Okay, so indentation will become even more important in those sections. All right, so yeah, I hope that's clear. Okay, control, control loop. Um, So this is the same as our example. It's just making use of the variable. As you can see here, it's using count. I'm not using laser. As you can see here, it's using count, right, to add something and then multiply it to the product. Okay, and then assign it back to the product. So essentially, you're multiplying the product by the next sequence plus one. Okay, so if this is four, right, it starts at zero and then product is one. So one times zero is zero plus one is one, and then one times one plus one is two, so it's two. One times two plus one is three, so it's six. And then one times three plus one is four, so six times four is 24. That's why you have 24 here, right? So it's just making use of the count here to achieve a certain product. In this case, it's making use of the syntax for the range. As you can see, it achieves the same result, all right? It's just that their logic is different in this case. And in this code, right, you might be asking, sir, there's no indentation. Um, yeah, this is just an error on the PowerPoint. And the one that created this PowerPoint is using Shell. They are not using Jupyter Notebook. So in Shell, right, you actually, mm, actually, I'm not quite sure if you should be using indentations in shells, but yeah, we're not going to be using shells, and odds are you're not going to be using it as well in the industry. You're going to be using, if not Jupyter, it's going to be another IDE, but there will be indentations. So the only ones that are using shells are the ones working on the back end, like on the servers or something. So you don't have to worry about that one. But there should be a tab here, right? If you were to put this code in Jupyter, put a tab there, indentation. All right. So it's making use of int and input, create upper and lower bounds. So as you can see here, it's making it dynamic. The range function, it's using variables here to indicate the start and the stop parameters of the range function. Okay, so in this way, you can get the sum of numbers starting from this number lower up to the upper plus one number. Now, why do you think they are adding plus one here? Can anyone answer me? Why do you think there's a plus one based on what you know with the range function? Okay, any volunteers? All right, so
Incrementation, sir.
all right, so incrementation, yes, but specifically why there is a plus one? Because you can just remove that one and then the incrementation is still the same, right? So this is actually the stop number. Upper plus one is the stop number, right? There are only two parameters here. So it's the start and the stop. Why are we putting a plus one on the stop parameter? Okay, I'm gonna pick someone, right? How about Mom Rochelle? Do you have any idea?
I think so that the when you run the code, it will not stop at 10 but at 11.
Correct. So it will stop at 11, right? Because you want to include the number 10. This is the upper bound, meaning this is the last number that you want to be added. So if you were to put 10 here, it won't be included, right? Because that's the last number and it's not going to include that number. So you have to add 1 here to make sure that the number 10 is included in the sum. So that's why they're putting plus 1 here. So I hope you guys understand the logic. Okay. All right. So augmented assignment. Okay. So this isn't really that important. It's more like a shortcut. So as you can see, a plus equals to 3 is just the same as a is equals to a plus 3. So what you're trying to do is you're adding 3 to variable a and then assigning it back to letter a. All right. If you're gonna write code in this manner, it's perfectly fine. All right. The difference between this one and this one is negligible. It actually made more difference before, right? During the 90s, 80s, where memory was really scarce, right? They wanted to make use of every bit of memory there is, all right? Um, in terms of efficiency, the one on the left is much more efficient. The one on the right isn't. Um, the reason is because the one on the right creates an extra variable in memory to store the temporary answer before saving it to the variable a. In this case, it automatically understood that it the computer should just add, depending on the operation on the left, let's say plus, it will add 3 to letter A in that same memory location. So it's more technical. But in these days, right, the processors are so fast already that their difference is actually quite negligible. If you were to pick one of the two, in terms of readability, right, the one on the left is better because it's shorter, right? And it's actually much faster the more you get used to it, reading code. Okay. This can actually get a little bit confusing when the code is long, right? Because you have to make sure that A and A are both the same. So you're gonna have to double check. Whereas in this one, right, you already know that it's just the same variable. You're just adding 3 to that variable. So right now, you can't really appreciate this one. Um, you'll get to appreciate this one more as you gain experience, really. So for now, it's perfectly fine to use the one on the left since it's actually easier to understand this way, right? So if you want to use the one on the left, the syntax is very simple. You start with the variable, followed by the operation that you want, followed by an equal sign, and then the value that you want to um, um, add, subtract to that variable. Okay. So depending on the operation that you want here. So let's see. It also works for strings, right? But it's gonna be concatenation. It's not addition. Okay. 1 to 4, not syntax, but other logic error. Yeah, the logic error here is on our end, not on the computer's end, because what we think is something else. Range, all right. List. So this is a short introduction of what list looks like in Python. So if you see something like this, right? Open and close brackets, and then in between, inside it's a bunch of values separated by commas, so that is a list, all right? That's the indication that what you're looking at is a list, all right? So here's an example. I said earlier that a string is a sequence, right? And that's true because if you take a look at it um, as it is, right? Its properties, um, strings are actually just a sequence of characters. I'm going to be using this one. All right, so for, let's say char, short for character, in the string Daniel, right? Okay, and I'm gonna print out each character. So if I do this one, it will print out each character in my name, right? Now you might think, how is this useful? Well, let's say the data that you got, all right, from somewhere, you don't know where it is, but you got the data. Let's say you have data that looks like this. Um, hmm, Okay, let's say for example it's a date, and then it is almost always in string format. So something like 01-05-2025, right? So if you're gonna use this one as is, you can't use it directly because it is in string format. You're gonna have to modify it a little bit to understand that um to make Python understand that this is actually a date, all right? So if you were to print this one out, okay, as you can see, you can identify each number, right? And let's say that the first two is actually the month, right? So let's see, per character in one. Okay, so we haven't actually gotten there yet, but we're going to be using methods to actually separate this one. But this is the first step, right? You're going to be accessing the character one by one, and then later on, we're going to learn how to separate, right? If you want to separate um, certain groups in a string. So let's say, for example, you want to separate this one, and this one using the dashes as a separator, right? So remember the print statement where um we have it here, right? Where is it? Where we are sep. Where's the sep? Mhm. Okay, this one, right? You remember the sep, and then it separates the output by each object by that character. So it's actually the same thing, but in reverse. We're going to be doing it in reverse. So it separates the string using that character. So we're going to be doing the same thing, but in reverse. And then it's acting up again, right? So yeah, you can do this one with strings, and then hmm, let's say, okay, let's think of something more concrete, like hmm, all right. Okay, so I can't really think of an example unless we discuss that part. So we'll just skip this one for now. It might get confusing later on. Mhm. Okay, so as you can see here from the examples, it's using something called list and then range, okay? The reason why it's using this one is that the range is a function. It will just give out numbers each time the function is called. So it's not technically a list. So that's why it's using the list function here to create a list out of that range function. So if I say 161, right, it will start at 1, end up at 5 in steps of 1. So this is now a list. And if you actually use that one, right? Um, so we haven't discussed list yet, but that's okay. This is just an introduction. So for example, for temp, and we have a list here. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right. So that is our list, right? So if you were to print temp, okay, then what you will get is the numbers inside of the list. So let's make it more random. How about something like this? Mm, correct. How about something like that? Run it. All right. So now it's printing out um, each value inside the list on the output, okay? Because this is what's happening, right? This is another sequence, okay? Just like with the string, okay, it's gonna give out each character to the temporary variable that you indicate here, and then you're able to use that variable for whatever purposes you want, okay? In this case, we're just actually just printing it out. We have no use for it right now. 54, pass it to the temp variable, and then print it. That's why we have it here. Next sequence, 87, pass it here, and then print. If you were to say, multiply this one by 2, then what you will get is each item on the list is multiplied by 2, all right? So, um, let's see. Mm, So technically, this is what the range is doing. It's just giving out a sequence of numbers, but the point is you can modify the sequence of numbers that you want, right? Because it's a function, right? As long as the definition of the function is like it gives out an iterable object or an iterable list, right? Along those lines, you can use a for loop on that one, and then you can access each value, okay? Each value here. By the way, uh, we call these things items, right? Each value in a list, we call this one item, okay? And it's always separated by commas. But we'll discuss more lists later on. So I think it's somewhere near the end, around here, I think. So yeah. What else can we do with this? So, right. So if we were to think of this one as variables, right? Let's move this one to a variable. We can do it like this. Let's say my name for the variable is age, right? And then this is actually a list. So this is how you create a list and then assign it to a variable. And then I want to create a loop on that list. So for temp in age, right? So it's the same thing. It will do the same thing as the one earlier, right? As you can see, the same output, but we're using variables now, okay? And ages Mm, actually, age should be here. So mm, maybe we can say this is what group? Let's just say this is a group, and this is the age of each individual person in the group, right? So now it's making more sense that we are attaching meaning to our variables, right? Because you're not going to be using variables like temp in an actual setting, right? You're going to be using actual names that have meaning. So for age and group, and at this point, you actually know that their ages are the following, right? And then you can make some sort of logic here later on that's going to say if the age is greater than 18, then you will count, uh, add it to count or something, right? So you can make some certain logics here later on that can do that, all right? And yeah, but anyway, we'll have more examples later on, the more that we learn about the other control structures, okay? Range. So yeah, you can actually use a negative number here on the step parameter to make it count backwards. So 10, 0, -1, it will print out something like this, okay? So if you're gonna use a for loop, it will print out not like this, but mm, and okay, yeah, it's removing the space, so it will print it out in one line. No, it's not the space, the new line character. That's why it's printed out in one line. Or you can put it in a list function and it will give you something like this, right? So although they look similar, they're not. This is each um each output is printed out in one line, and this one is just a list. So yeah. Anyway, that's for the for loop. Let's have a short exercise, okay? To see if you guys understand the lesson. Why does it do that? This one, what's happening with my browser? Okay. Let's say I have this one here. All right. To markdown. Right. This is your first exercise. Write a program that calculates the sum of all even numbers from 1 to a user's specified upper limit. So if I say I want it to add all the even numbers from 1 to 20, right? It can do that, or 1 to 40, it can do that. So the program that you're going to make has to be dynamic, right? It can adapt to what the user wants, what the upper limit of the user wants, okay? So you're going to be making use of variables here, the int, the input. You're going to be using for loop. And if you want to uh, make your output look nicer, you can use print statements here um, at the end, okay? And remember the indentations, all right? And the sequence of code is important, right? Python runs the code line by line. So uh, you have to think of what you need to do first, and the next step, and the next step, okay? So I'll give you guys around 5 to 10 minutes for this one. And then, yeah, that should be good. So we'll just have one exercise for now, and then if we have more time later, we'll have more exercise. So just one, just to, make sure that you guys understand. All right, guys, you have 4 more minutes. All right, it's still 10. Um, who wants to volunteer to show their position? Let's see, Andrea Sharon. Um, oh, okay. Who wants to share their answer first? All right. So I'm gonna choose one, okay? How about Sir, wait, how about Sir JJ? Hmm, no answer yet. Okay. All right. How about Sir Francis?
No, sir.
No, sir. Okay.
This is not true. This is correct.
Okay. That's okay. Okay. I'll let you share the screen. Okay. All right. So the floor is yours, sir.
This one, sir. I
All
just
right.
got this, but I haven't gotten to the summation part. Just enter the upper limit. Earlier po kasi nalagay ko yung lower limit, then nag-uulit lang
Mm,
siya ng payment ko. Pero this one, mas gumana siya. So, yung upper limit ako. So, just like siya ng pay. But for the summation, hindi ko po siya makuha.
Okay.
Earlier, pagka po yung ginagawa ko.
Mm, okay. So, the lower limit isn't actually needed, but that's okay. It will still work fine. So you haven't been able to reach the summation part, right?
Yes.
Okay. So that's all right, sir. At least you were able to get in the part for the for loop. All right. So thank you for sharing us your solution, sir. How about the others? How about Laura? Um, Sir Dimpy? You guys have answers? Or
I
even
didn't
partial
I
answers?
didn't think I got it.
Okay, that's all right, sir. You can share your screen. Try it out.
Okay, ayan. So naglagay lang ako ng enter upper limit. I assuming it starts at 1, so you don't need to put the lower limit. Tapos, uh, so if I run that, yeah, let's say 10 there, it just gets the even numbers, but I cannot add them yet.
All right. So Sir DP is actually using the modulo operator. So can you explain, sir, how the modulo operator works?
No, I just, ano, I just, I just Googled how to get and determine if a number is even.
Even okay. That's all right, sir.
So, ayan. So, kasi di ba sa challenge to find out if it's even. So, I
Yeah.
focused on that. Then, next step sana was to add all of this and get the sum.
Mm.
I ran out of time. Ayun.
So that's okay, sir.
Ayun. All right.
So good job, sir. You're making use of other resources, so that's good. So Googling is also a skill, guys. Don't be afraid to Google stuff. Um, but at least for now, I don't want you guys to resort to AI. Because uh, I've experienced it a lot that AI uh almost okay, not always, but generally gives out wrong um outputs, right? But for simple cases like this one, it will almost be correct. But in actual applications, like you're actually working on something, an actual project, it will have difficulty trying to produce the correct output because what everyone doesn't understand is that AI actually needs context. You need to make it understand what it's working on. Okay, so you're gonna have to walk it through to what you're doing before it can actually create um, solutions that are close to correct. Um, whenever I'm using AI, I'm just using it to actually verify some stuff quickly, like um, can I actually combine these functions in this way and create this kind of output, something like that. And it already knows the context of my project. And it won't give out the correct answer, but it will give out some ideas that I can explore. So that's what I'm using it for. I'm not really using it to create the actual, you know, code that I'm going to use, because it will almost always be um, wrong, because you can't give it the actual context of the entire project, because it's too big and it can't process everything. I'm not sure with the paid ones, um, but from what I've heard, it's not really that um, reliable yet as of now. Okay, so let me share my screen again. All right, so let's start first with what Sir did. Um, so he was using the modulo operator, right? The modulo operator is a special operator in mathematics where it gives out the remainder. Okay, so you guys remember the long divisions that we do before? So if we were to divide 5 by 4, what's the remainder? It's 1. If we were to divide 6 by 2, what's the remainder? It's 0. So the remainder is the first um, quotient that you get, right? So it's long division, right? Um, let's go to the online paint. Paint. Yeah, I'll just write it out. I hope you guys still remember long divisions. All right, so let's say 5, right? 5 divided by 4. So you get 1 here, you get 4, right? Minus and then 1. This is the remainder. This is what will come out when you are using the modulo operator. This is not the percent operator, okay? And the thing about this one is that yeah, nope. All right, the thing about this one is that if you're using to check it for even numbers, right? So there's actually a pattern to this one. So if you were to have the number 3 divided by 2, right? 1, 2, you get 1. If you have 4 divided by 2, get 2 here, 4 here, you get 0. So this is actually the pattern, 0 and 1. If the remainder is odd, the remainder is 1, it's odd. Sorry for the graphics. If the remainder is 0, it's automatically even. So that's why earlier it was checking if the number modulo 2 is equal to 0. It's using 2 equals because it's trying to check if the answer is 0. Okay? This is not the same as this one. All right? Equal is not the same as equal. So if you were to use that one for x in range, right, 20, for example, and then you're gonna check this. It's using the if. We haven't actually reached this part yet, the if control structure, but it works like something like this: modulo 2, right? And if the answer here is equal to 0, right, then the answer is even. Even, something like that. Wait. So I need to print out the number as well, x. So as you can see, 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, right? It will print out something like that, right? Those are the evens. If I were to change this one to 1 and then this one to odd, I print this one out, it will print out odd numbers only, okay? So I hope that makes sense for the modulo operator. And again, the equal here, you're trying to check if the expression on the left is equal in type and value on the right, okay? So this is a number, and the value of that number is 1. So the one on the left should be the same. It should be a number, and it should also have the value of 1. If it's true, then it will execute this one. This is this is what the if control structure will do, which we'll discuss later. If this condition is true, it will run this code. That's what it means. All right. But yeah, more on that later. For now, let's have the answer for this one, okay? So we have an upper limit, right? And then we're gonna say int, and then input, and then enter upper limit, something like that, okay? Sorry. And then after that one is, so you're creating a sum, right? You need something to hold the sum of the total sum, right? So I'm gonna say total, for example, here. And then I'm gonna assign the number 0 to this one because currently it is 0, right? Next is I'm gonna create a for loop. So for let's say number, right? But I want it to give me all the even numbers. So I could just say range, right? I could just start at 2 and then give the upper limit here, but I want to include the upper limit because it says here upper limit is inclusive. So upper limit, and then I want to add 1 to that upper limit because I want it to be included, and then the step. So how do you get the even numbers? So if you start at 2, then you'll just steps in 2, right? You just increase it by 2, and then you will also get another even number. So that's what I'm doing here, right? And then, so you have the number now, okay? You have the sequence of numbers that will generate even, even numbers, okay? From 2 up to the upper limit, and then it will skip in steps of 2. Um, but how do we add it to the total? So it's very simple. You just say total is equals to total plus number, right? And then assign it back to total. All right. So after this loop is finished, it finishes all of the even numbers, adds it all together. What you need to do is just print it out in the end. So as you can see, I am outside of the for loop right now. I'm not inside of the for loop because I want it to be printed out only once. Upper limit. So if I say 20, the answer is 110. All right. Let's do something simpler to check. How about the upper limit of 6? So that's 2 plus 4 plus 6. That is 12. So this is correct. Any questions about the solution? Yes, 30B, you have a question?
Oh no, I got it. I think.
All right. How about the others? I'm Laura. Lara?
No, sir.
No. All right. So if everyone is good with this exercise, we're gonna move on, okay? So don't be shy. If you have any questions, just ask them out, all right? Okay. And the next part is, what time is it? It's 2:25. Okay. We should be able to finish 1/3 of this PowerPoint. All right. Formatting text for the output. From the name itself, you're just gonna format it, right? You're just gonna present it in a better way. Um, let's see here. Tabular format, fill the width. Hmm. Okay. So the problem here is that the second number is not aligning properly, all right? Um, so I think it's on the next slide. Oh yeah, here it is. So this is the syntax if you want to format something in the print statement, right? So you start with the format string. Okay, this one, right? This is the format string, followed by the percent sign, followed by the datum or the data that you want to be formatted, right? Um, so we have these numbers here. Okay, so each percent that you see in the string indicates a different data, all right? So you can just think of it as a different column, okay? -3 here, okay, means that it's um it has a field width of 3, meaning it has 3 characters. And then the negative here is for left aligned, okay? So I only have this memorized because I have repeated this one a lot. But when you are formatting strings, make sure you are referring to references, okay? Because again, there's a lot of things to memorize in programming. No need to actually stress yourself out with memorizing things like the format strings. You can just use a reference for this one. Again, I don't have this one in my head. I only have this because I have repeated this one a lot on this specific slide. Next is the second column, so percent, and then 12. So you have 12 characters of state of allowance there. And then the D, of course, is an indication that it's a decimal, all right? So for the other codes, you can just search for it online. Okay, I'll leave it up to you guys to make use of your research skills, all right? So it should be there. It's not going to be hard to look for it. You might even find other ways of formatting text, which is easier, and that's good, really. There are other ways of formatting strings. You can format it with a method. You can format it with um, an F string. Actually, that's the one that I like, the F string, which I think we'll encounter that one later. So we're just going to explore this one just a bit, so that we'll see what it looks like. Okay. 10 exponent. Okay, let's just copy the example that it has. So for exponent, right? For exponent and range. Again, we'll just do one of this because it's not really that important. It's just formatting, just making it look better on the output. 11 print, okay, print, percent 50D, percent 12D string, and then this is percent. What's the next one? The datum, two datums, exponent. So this is exponent, and then can't exponent. Right, let's print this one out. Incomplete input and missing parentheses. All right. So, if I did not have this format string, right? And then I'm just gonna something. Mhm. Right. Yeah. Right. So if I didn't have the format string, I only have the output directly like this. Okay. This is the comparison that we have. So this is the same from the PowerPoint, right? It's not aligned. The second number is not aligned properly. So as you can see, the negative here will align it to the left. If there's no negative, then it will be right aligned. Okay. Um, So we say 3, right? So if you count this one manually, um, so you start at 1. Okay. Can you guys still read what I have on my screen, or is it too small? All right, so no comment means it's readable. All right. Okay, so I say 3, right? Negative 3D. So you have 3 character spaces. So if you count this one, readable, all right? So if you start at the left, so 1, 0, and then space, right? That's 3 characters. And then the next one is 12 characters. So space, space, 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's 4 already. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So including the space, that's 12 characters. So that's how you should read this output, right? So you have 3 spaces, and then for the first column, 12 character spaces for the second column, right? And then um this one here, right? Like this is the first column. It will correspond to the first data that you have here. This is the second column. It will correspond to the second data that you have here, all right? And so on and so forth. And then this is actually just good if you want to present your output in a table format. But again, in the end, we have something better than this one. So odds are you will not be using this in any way because we have visualizations in the end. That's what we're gonna present anyway to our employers, future employers. Okay. If you go over this one, like let's say I'm gonna make this 120. Okay. All right, what happens is that there's an overflow, right? It's more than 12 characters. So what it does is just it will go back to the default. Okay, after the 12 characters is used, it will go back to the left align. Okay, something like this. And then it's gonna look messy again, all right? So just be careful with that, right? Okay. That's it for this part. Let's go to the next one. So precision, this is exactly the same, but it's only for decimals. As you can see, the examples here is zero point 0, and then the second one is 0.00. The logic is exactly the same. So as you can see, this is an entire string. Okay. Uh, when it, Python will detect where the formatting will begin with the percent sign. Okay, so if it detects the percent sign there, it will begin the formatting there. Okay, and if you have only one data, you can just use it as is. You don't have to put open and close parentheses. The only reason that we had that one before is because we have two data that we want to format. All right. It's using a string here because you're trying to add you're trying to concatenate a string. Salary here is a number. So again, if you're adding a string to a number, it has to be, both of them have to be the same data type. So that's why there's a string function here. Okay, it converts the number into a string and it will give out this kind of output. Or you can just format it in this manner and then it actually looks better because it is the ideal representation of um, money, right? It has two decimal places. All right, so that's it. Selection statements. Okay, so we are now in the if and else if statements. Okay, so what is an if statement? Okay, this is the most basic definition. It allows a computer to make a choice based on a condition. Okay, so just like in real life, if you were gonna ask someone with an if question, right? Like if you go left, what will happen? This is what will happen. If you, let's say if you study hard, right, you will get higher scores. Not necessarily true, but just for the sake of an example. Um, so choices, right? Let's say you are at an airport, right? And uh, if you have a passport, you can ride a plane. If you don't have it, then of course you can't ride it. So there are two outputs. One is you can ride the plane, and then the other one is you can't. Okay. So based on that, computers can make decisions based on the inputs that it receives. In this case, the input is what? Whether you have a passport or not, whether that is true or false. Okay. So that is the next part, the syntax for um, if. So before that, we have to actually understand comparison operators. Okay, so whenever you see these operators, it always results to true or false. Okay, so equal, equal, you're just comparing the two numbers if they are both equal in amount and in type. So if they are equal, it will become true. If not, it will become false. Not equals, of course, it's just the opposite. Why do we have this one? There are certain applications where this is better and it will result into a shorter code. Okay. Greater than less than, of course, you know this already. Okay, so all of these comparison operators, what will it will just result to either two things, true or false. That's what the Boolean data type is. And let's add that one here actually. Boolean data type. Where is it? Data type. Okay, I think we'll just get confusing. Okay. All right. So Boolean data type is marked down. Okay, so this can either only be true or false. That is what a Boolean data type is. Or it can also be 1 and 0. It depends on what you're working on. So both of them are correct. Correct. Okay. Um, let's see. So I don't think there's any need for examples on this one, right? It's fairly straightforward. All right. So there's actually no, I didn't show the syntax. All right. This is the syntax for an if condition. So you start with the keyword if, right? Followed by the condition, all right? And then colon, and then code to execute if condition is true. So this is the syntax of the if condition, right? So the same with what we had earlier. Where was it? It was in the exercise part. Okay. I think I deleted it. All right, never mind. So let's have a quick example. Let's say I'm gonna save it to a variable, okay? Condition. All right. Okay. And then let's just say that this will result to true. And then if condition, right? Then this is what it will do. Print Daniel. Okay. And as you can see, it will print out Daniel. If the condition is false, all right, it will not do anything. Okay. So if you want it to do something when it's false, then you can put an else statement here and then print, let's say, how about another person like Keanu, for example. All right. So if this is false, if the condition is false, it will print the one from the else. If the condition is true, it will print this one. All right. Now, what if you have multiple conditions? Let's go back to our earlier example with the passport. Let's say the one at the the one that checks passport. Okay, do you have a passport? No, I don't have a passport. Do you have a ticket? So you do have a ticket, right? So you're still able to ride the plane, for example. Um, so it's kind of like there's another condition that it can check, right? So the way that you do that in Python is called the else if, or the elif for short. Um, so the same format, elif, and then this is the second condition. So this is condition 2, right? So I'm going to make another condition here, condition 2. Okay, and I'll set this one to true. Take note of the true and false values. Okay, it has capital letters, P and F, right? Okay, so print, and then this will print out what rows. Okay, so if the first condition is false, right, it will go directly to the second condition here. And since this is true, it will print out this one, all right? And then it will automatically skip the remaining code. So next, after the if, let's add this one so that you guys will understand the flow of the program. Okay, so condition 1 is false, right? So it will skip this one. Condition 2 is true. It will print this one, and then it will skip the else because the if condition is done. This entire block is done, right? So it will go directly to the next line of code, which is this one after the if, right? So the moment that one of those conditions is true, it will skip the rest and then go directly to the next line. If none of those conditions are true, it will go to the else, then it will go to the next line, right? So from this point, you can ask, sir, can I add more elifs? Yes, you can add as many elifs as you want. But we have a kind of rule in programming where if you have so many things to check that needs to be true, right? Maybe you can just check for something that is false and then um, do have the same output, okay? Between elif and if, okay. Elif is if you want to add a second condition, kind of like a second question. Like if you don't have the first thing, do you have the second thing? Like, it's the same thing as when they are asking you for your IDs. Like, do you have a field ID? No? Okay, maybe you have a driver's ID. Okay, no? Maybe you have a SSS ID. And then you're gonna say yes. All right. So it's more like the computer is asking you um for other things like so that it will have the same kind of output that you want. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. The analogy makes sense. But elif is just short for else if. That's why it's called elif. In other languages, it's actually else if. You're gonna have to spell it out. All right. Okay. Any other questions? So elif will always come after the if, okay, not the other way around. And then else will always be the one at the very end. Can you put multiple conditions? Can you put multiple ifs? Yes, you can put an if inside of an if. So you can just think of this as succeeding questions if one is true, okay? So earlier we were asking IDs, right? Okay, let's say you're gonna say yes to driver's ID. Okay, do you have an driver's ID? Yes, all right. Do you, is it registered? Like it's like a follow-up question. That's what the next if is gonna do. Okay, it's like a follow-up question. So that's the kind of mindset that you should be thinking of when you're creating if conditions, right? Like the one earlier. So the code earlier was asking if the current number is even, right? Continue kasi pag if or else lang, you're limited to only two choices. Mm, yes, that is correct, sir. You're open to alternate choices. Yes, that's exactly correct. All right. How about the others? Is it clear what the if control structure is? You might be asking, can I put a for loop inside an if? Yes. Can you put an if inside a for loop? Yes. So it works as well. All right. So I think it's clear. There are no more questions. Let's proceed. Okay. So this is just an example of what I said earlier. Yes, it's always at the bottom because uh, it's the one that's executed, sir, if all the other choices before is false. So yeah, it's always at the last. All right. In this example here, um, it's using import, right? So let's have a quick introduction of what the import math is. So we're not going to go too deep on this one right now, maybe later on. So we'll just think of this one as import math, right? Let's say let's say there's a file somewhere, right? And it's called math, and it has a bunch of functions like the if, the int, the print. That is um, more focused on mathematics. That's what this is doing. Okay, it's trying to import that file, okay, that has all those functions that are specialized for mathematics. Okay, so like for statistics, maybe calculus, I don't know, but um, it has all those other functions that uh, Python doesn't have at the beginning. Okay, and that's actually the great part um, about these things is because you can also use other libraries that are similar to this one but have different specializations. Like, for example, if you just want to focus on statistics, you can just choose that one. Okay. But the point here is that in this example, it's trying to make use of the square root function, right? Why is it doing this one instead of um because it's actually harder to create a function yourself rather than using one that's already been created. So that's another rule that we have in programming. We call it dry. Okay, this is short for don't repeat yourself. Okay. Sorry, I was spelling yourself. If the code or the technology that you need already exists somewhere, right? Then you have to ask yourself, should I just use that one instead of creating my own? Because it will take a lot longer if you actually create one yourself, okay? Rather than using the one that's already been made by someone else, okay? Of course, you're gonna have to um use ones that are trustworthy, okay? Not the ones that are only a few people are using, okay? So use libraries that are safe. Okay. Um, so from what I know, usually the ones that you found in Anaconda, there's no um malicious code, right? But it doesn't actually hurt to just have some kind of checks for yourself. Like you have to make sure like there's around 100,000 people using this library or something, and then before you actually use it yourself. So yeah, but more on that later. Okay, let's not complicate ourselves for now. But the point here is that in this code, it's just trying to make use of the square root function, okay, because it's not readily available in Python, because it wants to look for what the radius of the area. That's what it's trying to look. So if, let's see, we're putting, or the input is asking for the area, right? And if the area is greater than 0, it's going to look for the radius of that area, and then it will print it out. Otherwise, if the area that we enter is not greater than 0, then it will print out an error. The area must be a positive number, all right? So this is one application of it. And here's the syntax. By the way, I hope you notice that there's indentations here, okay? To indicate grouping. So take note of that one. Next. So this is just a flowchart to help you guys understand more what's happening with the if function. If control structure, I mean. Simplest form, what's this one? Okay, this is for the if else. This is for the if condition only. All right, so multi-way selection. All right, so there are 4 conditions that needs to be checked, right? And these are all the grades that um that specific value should be in order to have this kind of grade. So this is the code that is used for that question. So it's trying to check if the number is greater than 89, letter is equals to A, and then if it's greater than 79 is B, and so on and so forth, right? But let's see here. The letter grade is letter. So the letter variable here. You could declare the letter here at the top at the beginning, but this is actually good as well. All right. The thing about this one is that you're gonna have to be careful with greater than and less than comparison operators because um the order is actually important, right? The one at the very top, what you should check first is the one with the highest number, right? So it's 89. Because if you were to swap them out, if you were to put 69 here, and then you input the grade of um let's see, if you put 69 here and then you input the grade of 70. So it's grade A. Like it's very high, right? And that's wrong, where it should be C. So you have to be careful with the sequence of the numbers when you're using greater than and less than comparison operators. Okay. Um, right. So as you can see, it starts with 89, next is 79, and then next is 69. So if you have 85, then it will be letter B. If you have 75, then letter C. Else, any other number less than 69 or equal to 69 will have the grade of F. So that's what it means here. So technically, this is just the same with our ELIF example earlier. Mhm. So these things, where do you find these things? You will find this when you are trying to discuss with your team members, right? It's not just you that's creating the program, there's a lot of you. Okay. So you are responsible for this part of the program, you are responsible for this part of the program, and then in the end, you're just gonna combine it all together. Okay. And then what will help your team, right, be on the same page is looking at these kind of diagrams. And usually it's indicated here the variables that you're gonna use, the data type, that's the data type that's moving around, and then the conditions like this one on what to do if it's true or false, right? So the whole team has kind of like one big flowchart that they have to follow so that they won't get lost when they're creating the program, right? So that's where you will find something like this. Do you need to understand what these triangles mean, these squares? Not really, not right now, because from my experience, each company has their own kind of um, symbols that you want to use. But there are general symbols. Okay, technically for decisions part, it's this one, the diamond, and then the squares are for what to do, right? So that's the general way of using this one, but it can be different in other companies, right? So right now you don't actually need to do this one to memorize this one. All right, so here's another example, compound Boolean expressions. All right. So technically, it's just trying to convert this code into something simpler, the one below, okay? So the logic here is that the one at the top is that it's using an if control structure to check if the number is greater than 100, it will print out an error. If it's less than 0, it will print out an error. Okay, but you can actually combine this one. That's why we have compound Boolean expressions, all right? And there's only two of them. There's the and the or. Okay, there's another one. There's a not, actually. So there's three of them, three compound Boolean expressions. So as you can see here, if the number is greater than 100 or the number is less than 0, then you can print out an error, something like this, okay? Um, so as you can see, this is much more easier to read, right? When you read it directly, like it was just like a sentence, you would understand it, right? That's the great thing about Python. It's much closer to the English language than other programming languages out there. Okay, that's why it's a lot easier to learn. Um, so how does the compound Boolean expressions work? The and, the or, and the not. So this is what appears here. Okay. So A and B are the conditions. So based on the example, right? A and B, these are the conditions. So it's for letter A, it's number greater than 100. Letter B is number less than 0. Okay. So these are the two conditions. These are the A and B here. Okay. Now, remember, these comparison operators will always result to what? True or false. So technically, if you put them all in a table, all the possible values, this is what we get, the truth table, right? So all the possible values that you can have with true and false, if you're using the and, if you're using the or, and if you're using the not, right? So let's just make this simple, okay? Take a look at the outputs here, okay? A and B. So it will only be true once when both the left A and the right B are true. So that's the only thing that you need to take note of. If either one is false, it's automatically false. The opposite is what I can say for the or compound Boolean operator, okay? So A or B. So it's always true, but it can only be false once. When? When both the left and the right is false. So it can only be false at that time. And it actually makes sense, right? So in English terms, if the one on the left and then or the one on the right, right? If either one of them is true, then it will execute this one. So it's exactly the same as what we have here above. Okay, it's much more simplified here. And it's actually much easier to understand because there's just two lines of code. And yeah, it's actually much easier to understand. The not operator is very easy. It's just the opposite. So if you have true, it will make it false. If you have false, it will make it true. So it might seem like it's not useful right now, but there's a lot of use cases for the not operator, especially if you want something to start at a certain value. Like you want the program to work when it's false, but the moment that it becomes true, it will do something else. But it has to be false always, all right? So you're gonna have to use a not operator on that one. Um, why you shouldn't use regular true or false? It's because you're gonna put it in an if condition. That's the trick. So we're gonna have an example of that later. So it's kind of confusing at first, but um, it makes more sense when you actually apply it and then see it later on. All right. Um, so this is just an example of what I said earlier. So just take note of that one. For and, both true for the left and right. For or, both false for the left and right. The not operator is just the opposite. Okay. So these are all the operators that we have currently that we have discussed. So we have exponent, negation, the basics of mathematics, comparisons, logical operators, not and or, and then assignment operator. It's not actually included here the augmented assignment, like the plus equals, minus equals, but that should be part of this one. Short circuit evaluation. So we shouldn't be concerned with this one too much. It's something that's happening inside of our computer. Like let's go back to our OR condition. Um, so we didn't actually have an example of that one, right? Let's say we have a number here. Number is equals to 55. And then if number is greater than 0 and number is less than 100, right? That was a condition. And then it will print out number is positive. It should be a string. Number is positive. Um, what was I trying to do again? Short circuit evaluation. Okay. Um, okay, this actually doesn't work. Let's change the second condition here. So 60, for example. All right. So my first condition is checking if the number is greater than 0. My second number is checking if the number is greater than 60. Right now I have two conditions and I'm using the AND logical operator. Okay. Now, since the number is 55, right? It will what? It will check first of course, the first condition. So the moment that this is true, right? Since we're using the, oh, no, wait. Okay, since this is true, right? And then we're using the AND operator, it will check the second condition if it's also true. But the moment that this is false, let's say for example, -5, right? What's happening? Okay, there, the num lock isn't on. Let's say the number is -5. Okay, so this part is false, right? Now, what did we learn with the AND logical operator? The moment that one is false, it will automatically be false. This entire thing, the entire condition, is now what? False, right? So in order to save memory and processor resources, it will not execute the second one anymore, right? Because whatever the result of the second one is, since the first condition is already false, the result will always be false. So I hope I'm making sense here. That is what short circuit evaluation is. It's skipping checking the next condition because the result is already solved. It's already false, whatever the result of the second condition is. So that's short circuit evaluation. All right. Testing selection statements. Okay. All right. The correct one. Mhm. Okay. All right. Let's have an exercise for the if. Mm, nothing too hard. And then, okay. Let's try this one. Okay, this is the last exercise, and then we'll have our break. Okay. All right. All right. So this is what I want you to do. Write a program that determines the ticket price for a movie based on age. So children under 12 get a discount, and seniors over 65 also get a discount. So I leave it up to you guys how much discount you want to give to the children and the seniors. And also leave it up to you guys how much the price is for the ticket. Okay. It doesn't really matter. The point is that you must follow the logic that's in here. Okay. So make use of variables in this one, input, if, else if you can, and then print. So yeah. I don't think there's any need for a for loop on this one. So just like before, 10 minutes. I'll check your work at 3:18. And then after that, we'll have our break. All right. Okay. All right, time's up, guys. Who has an answer? So it's much easier than the earlier exercise, right? Okay, Sir Dimpy, you have the floor.
Yeah, okay. Share ko na lang.
Let me stop. Okay. Okay.
Okay. So I put in, you have to input the age.
Mhm.
So enter age. Tapos, nilagay ko na lang if and if statement. So, kinonvert ko rin muna siya sa integer kasi ayaw tanggapin ng una na pag nag-input string yung lumalabas yata. So,
Mhm.
para maging number siya. So, int age and ano. So, it has to be less than 12 or more than 65. Ayan. So, tapos, if it satisfies, it's ineligible for discount. If not, it's not eligible for discount. So, pag nirun ko siya, let's say, ang age is 2, it will print eligible for discount. Tapos, pag the age is 66, eligible. Tapos, pagka, let's say, 44, not eligible. Ayan. So, it satisfies naman. Kasi hindi ko alam kung saan nanggagaling tong non-44. Ayun lang.
None. Let's see.
It's printing something I didn't intend. Yun lang yan.
So print into age and then which word? Hmm.
It's always present eh, you know.
You can try removing the print statement, sir, because the parameter for the input is the prompt. So you can just directly ask it enter age. So input and then enter age. There's no need for a print statement inside. So yeah, that one. So just
Okay.
delete the print statement and then the other
Oh
parentheses.
yeah.
Okay. So try running the code again. All
Oh
right, there
yeah.
you go.
All right, thank you.
And then so that was Sir DP solution. How about the others? Do you have something similar or okay, Sir JJ, yes. You're free to share your screen, sir.
Kita niyo na, sir.
Yes, po.
Well, ito yung sa akin naman. So, I have specified a specific discount for um, those na bata and those above 65. So, pag in-enter mo siya, senior citizen na siya, so sa 75, load siyang movie, may discount siyang 25%. But if kung bata siya, let's say 11 years old, meron siyang discount na 10%. Pero if between, let's say, 24, wala siyang discount.
Okay. So there's a gap in your logic a little bit, sir. So it's correct now if you put um an age in between 12 and 65, it should say no discount applied. Can you try putting sir 70?
70 years old?
Yeah,
70.
all right, so that's correct. Can you try inputting 6? All right, so there are two outputs that you see. You have a discount of 10% and then no discount applied. So you have two outputs there because you're using two different if statements. You're using two, it's like you're asking two different questions, two different you know, two different types of questions. So one is for less than 12 and the other one is for greater than 65. So I think it's actually better, sir, if you are going to use elif on the second one. So try putting elif, sir, on the second condition that you have there. So elif number greater than equal to 65. And then run the code again. And then try inputting 6. 6. So
Six.
yeah. Okay, so there you go. That's the correct output. There should only be one output. You have a discount of 10. Earlier, you have two kinds of output. So to the user, it will kind of seem confusing because at the first, it will say you have a discount of 10%. And then on the second line, it says there's no discount applied. So which one is true, right? So I hope I'm making sense. Was that clear, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
So
sir. Thank
thank
you
you
po.
for sharing, Sir JJ. How about the others? Do you have um any other ways of answering it? Let's see. How about from Laura? Lara. All right. Mhm. All right. So can you explain to us, ma'am, your logic in this program? I think you're muted, ma'am, if you're trying to speak.
Okay na po. Am I audible po, sir?
Yes.
So, based on my logic po, since children and seniors have discount, so I use yung logic na and. So, instead na if, pwede naman po siya use ang and. So, I use here like if age is greater than 12 and age is greater than 65. Tama ba? Tama ba yung ano po? Um, so yeah,
Good.
it will get, hindi
5%
sila makaget ng
discount.
ano po. Yes po.
All
So
right.
let's try po if ano.
So
So
try
let's try if
70.
a 70. So if 70, so they will get 5% of movie discount. So let's try po 11. So, uy, bakit walang movie? Mali yung logic. Ah,
Yes.
narito po siya ako sa ano po, sa greater and less than po.
That's okay, ma'am. So right now you're using the and, right? So remember the and, both conditions need to be true in order to execute the code print 5% discount, right? So currently your logic there is the same as you saying that the age of the person must be greater than 12 and it should also be
Biglang
greater
murag mali.
than 65. So if you run the code, ma'am, and give it 40, try giving it 40. All right, so it's gonna say no movie because 40 is not
Mm,
greater than what?
40 is not greater than po, 65.
Yes. So you can't
Mali yung
have,
logic.
yeah, you can't satisfy the age in that way because you can't be greater than 12 and at the same time greater than 65 and then get a discount, right? Oh, no, wait, you can get that one, but you can't be in between those numbers and not get the discount. So that's why it's wrong. But that's okay, ma'am. At least you understand what you need to fix.
Okay po, thank you po,
So
sir.
what you can do there is you can say age is less than 12 or age is greater than 65. So try doing it. Less than 12, change the and to or, and then run the code again. That should work. Um, okay, not exactly 12 because you're just using less than. Try 5. 5, right? So discount. Try 70. All right, discount. Try 50. No discount. All right. Okay, so thank you for sharing your solution, Ma'am Lara. Okay.
Thank you po, sir.
I think that's enough. Um, So no one actually um tried to create a program with a price. Like like you could have created a variable for a ticket price, like, you know, like the price is $20 for the ticket, and then using some mathematics, right? 10% discount. So what you will get is $18 in total or something. Okay. So, but I think it's great that the logic that you're doing is correct. Um, I just thought that someone would add some kind of ticket price, so that's okay. At least the logic is correct, so that's what's important. All right, it's 3:30. I want you guys to be back here after 20 minutes, so I think 20 minutes is too long. Maybe 15. 3:35. Okay, I want you guys here to be back by 3:35. Yeah, 15 minutes. So yeah, have a good break, guys. I'll see you in 15. Right? Don't exit the room, okay? Just stay here and then just, mute. Right? See you later. Right. I hope you guys are all here. So it's 3:49. Right. Um, all right. Let's go now to the next part. All right, so here's another loop that we need to learn. It's called the while loop, and it uses something called a sentinel. And this is actually just a special value or object that is used to indicate the end of a sequence or the absence of a value. So technically, this will just stop the whole thing, right? Um, so let's take a look at the syntax. All right. So this is the condition. Oh, no, this is the syntax for a while loop. So first it will begin with the while keyword, and then afterwards it's followed by a condition similar to the if, all right, and then colon, and then afterwards it's the block of code that it will execute. Okay, so there should be a indentation here, but it's not present. Improper use may lead to infinite loop. So yes, it will do that. And it is also called the entry control loop. All right. So technically, this is what you want to use if you want to repeat a certain block of code until a specific condition becomes false, right? So that's the trick. Until it becomes false, it will not stop executing the code. And it's very easy to create an infinite loop with this one, right? Uh, Are infinite loops dangerous? Yes. There are some services nowadays, especially on the servers, where it will um, bill the user for every function that you use. So if it has a loop there, then it's gonna cost you a lot. Um, what else? Infinite loops can crash computers, right? There are safeguards in all devices for infinite loops, but for the really tricky ones, it will always result to your computer having a blue screen of death or something similar. It will just freeze without any reason, right? So that's what happens because the memory, right, is full. So yeah, avoid this one at all times. Um, it's not like you can't have this one. It's more like um there should be an exit condition, right? There should be a way to stop the loop, but it just isn't satisfied yet. So that's what we're trying to do. Okay. Um, let's see. So this is what a while loop looks like. Um, hmm. All right. So let's analyze the code here. While data is not equal to blank, so it's trying to ask the user for enter a number or just enter the quit. So either a number or just a blank input. Um, so if it's not a blank input, right? So this is the part where the not equal is useful, okay? It's trying to check if it's not equal to a blank rather than checking if it's a uh, number, right? Because it's actually, so if you want to check for a number, what do you do? Um, there are a lot of ways to check if it's a number, right? You can use comparison operators for that one. You can use other functions. You can use um, specific methods that can detect if it's an integer or not, right? But you don't actually know if it's an integer or not, right? It's not indicated here that it should input an integer value. But what you can do here is instead of checking if it's a number, you can just check um, if they enter a blank, all right? Now, why are we using a not equal to? Because we are checking if it's a number, right? So if we want to check if it's a number, then obviously it's not a blank character, right? So that's what we're using here. We're trying to check if it's not a blank character because we want to check if it's a number. Because we're only choosing between one or the other, right? So this is one of those things where not equals is actually useful. So since it is not equal, right, this entire condition now becomes true, okay? And if it's true, then it will execute these blocks of code up until where? Up until data, right? So number is equals to float. It's going to convert the number to a float number. And then it will add that number to the sum that we have here at the top. And then what? It's going to ask for another input, right? So at first here, it's just one. So we have to make a way for it to ask another input, right? Because after this, if you don't put another data input here, the value will always be the first value that it got. It will never change. So you have to put the same code inside to change the um value inside of the data variable. All right. And then it will keep on doing that until you press enter. So here is a sample output. So 3, 4, 5, and then since at this part the user has entered a blank, so they just entered it immediately. That's why it will give out the this output, the print. All right. So it will say the sum is 12. So it's just the total of the previous numbers. All right. Data here is the loop control variable, or this is the sentinel, I think. Yeah. Because this is the part where um it will stop. Okay. So let's see. Is there another example here? The next one. Okay. So basically, it's a comparison between a for loop and a while loop. So you have a for loop here. It's a range from 1 to, what's this? 100,001. And then it will add all those numbers up. So if you were to convert that one to a while loop, you're gonna be using two variables, the sum and the count. And then while count is less than to what? 100,000. And then inside of the while loop, you're gonna have to um, include a code there that increases the value of count, right? Because in the for loop, it does this automatically with the range function. In the while loop, it doesn't. So you have to manually put the code there that will increase the value of count on each iteration. And that's what it's trying to do here, right? So it's fairly simple because we came from the for loop, right? It's much easier to understand this one compared to the for loop, all right? Let's see here. All right, so we have the break statement here. So there's actually two things with this. There's the break and then there's the continue. Um, so let's say we have a number here, right? And then we'll make this equal to 1 for now. And then while number is less than what, 50, what will it do? It will print out the number. So just something simple like this one. Okay. what should we do? It's using break and okay. So break, right? The break statement is used to prematurely exit a loop. Like if you don't want the loop to continue, then it should execute the break. Otherwise, um, it will just continue as is, right? But if you want it to stop at a certain point earlier than the actual endpoint, right, you're gonna have to use the break statement. So for example here, mm, so this is the current output, right? Um, okay, so something like this, for example, I forgot to increase the number variable. So as you can see, the kernel here is always black because I created what? I created an infinite loop because I forgot to increase number by one. So in these cases, what you need to do is to see there's not enough memory to open this page because there's an error. So what you need to do is just refresh it, and then hopefully it should still be there. All right, so it's still there. So in this case, it didn't really crash, right? Because it's a relatively simple infinite loop. So most devices can handle these kinds of things, okay? Depending on your device, there's a certain limit on how many iterations it needs before it can say that it is an infinite loop. So on some devices, it needs 8,000 iterations. And on some devices, it's 500. So I think it depends on um, the specs of your device. Okay. So what I need to actually do here is what I need to add one to number. Mhm. Class status, ano. Why is it unknown? All right, so it's not functioning properly. So if it's something like this, you can go to kernel and then restart kernel. Then restart. And then it should be good. Okay, there it is. So it's now white. That means it's currently idle. And you can do another run on your program. So run. All right, and now I have this one up to 50. 50 not included. Unless of course I put less than or equal to 50 there, and then 50 will now be included. Okay. Um, let's say I want this program, this loop to stop at 25. Okay, so what should I do, right? Um, so we can ask, right? The computer can ask a question like if number is what equal to 25, right? Then I want it to stop. So this is where you put the break statement, right? And after the break, you'll print out what is the final value of number. So the final value of number is number, right? And there it is. The final value of number is 25. So as you can see, it didn't finish the whole thing, right? Because the moment that this condition becomes true, it will execute the break and then it will uh, stop the whole loop, okay? This will also work in all other areas in programming. So in the for loop, in functions, zoom, right? It will work the same way, okay? Um, let's change this one to continue, all right? Continue. So what does a continue do? So if you run this code, right? If you observe here, okay, so all right. So it still appears here. So why, right? Why does it still appear here even though I said continue? Because what continue will do is that it will skip that iteration, right? But it seems that it's still printed out. So the actual output is supposed to be 24, and then it will go directly to 26. Okay, now, since we are in this condition, if I were to ask you guys, how will you fix this one, right? How will you fix this code in order for the output to be correct so that it will show 23, 24, and then 26. 25 will be excluded. All right. So based on what you know, how will you fix this code? So can anyone answer? All right. So no volunteers. Any guesses? Well, guesses. How will you fix it? All right. What should I do in order to fix it? Why is 25 there where it should not be there, right? Because I have this condition. If it's equal to 25, then it should just continue. But why is it there? Why is it on the output? Okay. And anyone analyze the code and give me the reason why and how to fix it. Okay. Sir Dimpy, Sir Francis, any ideas? Yes, Sir Dimpy.
Sorry, ano yung i-fix? Yung infinite siya or yung lumalabas yung 25?
The 25, sir. So what the continue will do is it will skip that iteration. So technically
Ah,
25 should not appear here, but why is it appearing on the output in this case? So I did something wrong here. Can you tell me what I did wrong? And what do I need to do to fix it?
actually, parang philosophy yung sagot ko, you just remove continue and balik mo yung break.
Well, that can be correct, but it defeats the purpose. All right. So thank you for that, Sir Dimpy. I saw Sir Francis raising his hand earlier. Yes, sir. How about you?
Question ko, yung pwede kaya alisin yung isa pang equal sign?
Which one,
Hmm.
sir?
Di ba dalawa po yung equal sign yung sa if number is equal to 8.5?
Mm.
May magbabago po ba sa alisin siya?
If I were to remove this one, this whole thing,
Yung isang equal sign lang po.
that will not work, sir, because one equal sign is you assigning that value to that
Ay, okay.
number.
Yes.
Yeah. So that will not work.
Number is ganun.
All right. So thank you for that, Sir Francis. How about the others? Ma'am Rochelle, how about you? I haven't heard from you yet.
Not really sure. I don't know.
Okay, well, guess. Right. Okay. So the reason for this one is because if you remember, Python will Francis, what's this one? Yeah, I can check this one later, sir, if there's if there's still time. All right. So thank you for this, sir. All right. Um, So if you guys remember, Python will run the code line by line, right? So if we analyze this code, right, after assigning one to number, after confirming that number is less than 50, and then we're going to perform the next line, which is print the number, add 1 to the number, and then check if the number is 25. Okay. And then continue if it's equal to 25. Now let's skip all the other iterations and let's go to 25. Okay. So number plus 1, right? It will become 25, right? Let's say our current number is 24. Okay. So number is 24, right? And then 24 is less than 50, so that's correct. Print the number 24, add 1, it becomes 25. It reads it as 25 and then continues. Then goes back to the top here. 25 is less than 50. It will print that out. 25 plus 1, it will be 26, and then it will not execute this one again. So the reason why 25 is appearing, therefore, is because we are printing it first before doing a check. So what we need to do actually was just to change the sequence of the code. This is what we needed to do. We need to check first if the number is equal to 25, because if it is, then we'll just skip the whole thing, right? The code, Python will stop here. It will skip everything else afterwards, okay? In this loop only. So it won't execute the print and the number plus 1. But this is still wrong because if we, let's see, if we include plus 1 here, let's try and run this code. Okay. So what will happen? What will happen here is that it will be another infinite loop because we are not anymore adding 1 to the number. So we got what we wanted. 25 is not displayed anymore, but it's also not displaying 26 and up to 50. So we need to check our logic again. So again, what do we want? We want to skip if it's equal to 25, right? If it's not equal to 25, then we want it to print out the number and then add 1. So where will we put add 1 so that it won't become an infinite loop? Let's see. So if the number is less than or equal to 50, right? That's the part where we are checking if the number is less than or equal to 25. So that's correct. So over here, we need to add an extra code inside of our if condition that will add 1 first to the number and then skip afterwards so that this condition will not be executed on the next iteration. So if I were to run this code, it will now be correct, right? So 1 up to 50, but let's see here. 25 is not present. So that's what the continue will do. It will skip that specific iteration. So when number is equal to 25, whatever it will do, it will skip that one. Okay. So yeah, that's one solution for it. And you might have noticed that the final value of the number is 51. Why? Because our condition is less than or equal to 50. So it needs to be greater than 51 before this will become false. Okay, so you have to remember that one. That's why the final value is 1 greater than 50. All right, so that's it for the break and continue and for the while loop. Let's see. You can do it like this if you want, like you are intentionally creating infinite loops, and then you're just using break and continue inside to control if it will exit the loop or not. So that's actually okay. this is actually valid code. So as you can see, while true, it's using the true value to create an infinite loop. But there are conditions here that if the number is between 0 and 100, it will break. Else, grade must be what? Between 0 and 100. So that's what it will do. Alternative use a Boolean variable to control the loop. Yes. So this is another way of using the not logical operator. So currently done is equals to false, right? So if you want a certain loop to work while not changing the variable, the Boolean value for done, you're gonna have to use the not operator. So this is one situation where the not operator is useful. When creating code that would have influence to add break at the bottom, is it good practice when creating code that would have infinite loops to add break at the bottom? Mhm. No, it's not like it's good practice because you're using breaks to control when it will stop, right? Because you can actually have, if you think about it, you can have multiple break statements in your loop, right? You can have you can have an if condition here, right? Condition, right? And then if this is true, it will break. If elif and then another condition, it will also break. Or you can have another elif here. If this is a condition, then it will what? Continue. Because you can actually do it like this. You can have multiple breaks. It doesn't have to be just at the end, okay? It's when you want it to end. That's the trick. When when is it good to stop the loop at that point? Okay, so that's the trick that you want to solve in dealing with problems related to loops. All right. So it's not like the if condition where you have to always put the else at the very end, because actually you can just skip the else if you want, right? Um, yeah, it's not like that. So it's more on the placement, on where the timing, on when you want the program to stop, the loop to stop. Okay. All right. Let's see. Mhm. Random module. So this is just another library that we can use to um create random numbers. But let's deal with this one for now because we're gonna be dealing with import state more later on. Let's focus more on um Python as is, right? Without anything added into it first before dealing with imports because it will get confusing really quickly. Um, yeah. So let's just skip this one for now. Errors throughout while testing while loop. Incorrect initialize, update, yes, we have to test it correctly. So, in development, right? When you're developing anything, app, website, so there is something what we call test cases. All right. And then you can actually make careers with this one, just you making test cases, right? Um, Basically, you're throwing anything possible to that code and then have a certain output associated with that specific input. Like for example, if the input is 1, the answer should be A. If the answer input is 2, the answer should be B. All right. If the input is not a number, right? So that's NaN, not a number. The output should be error. Okay. So it takes into account all the possibilities because the user might not give the correct input, right? Um, so technically, this is like failure to test it correctly, all right? Because you need to test your own code for all possible values. But the problem is when you are creating your own code, especially at the beginning, is that you're not testing it for live cases, right? Like um users will not always input the correct thing. You have to take that into account. So you should have a way to handle those kinds of values. And in some ways, creating test cases is actually much more tricky. But in the long run, this is actually safer because you can make um, you can make your code as long as you like. As long as it passes those test cases, your code is safe or something like that's the kind of logic that um, you should put your mind into when creating test cases. So when dealing with creating programs, I usually think of basic test cases like um, let's say for example earlier that's why I was asking if anyone was creating prices for the discounts because in my mind I would do something like, okay, so if my input was something like this, price was 10, and then for a child discount of 10%. So the output here would be what? 9. If it was an adult, right? There is a 20% discount. Output would be what? 8, right? So these are the kinds of test cases that I'm running my head around. So basic, simple ones, just so that you can check your uh, code, right? But you should not stop at just one test cases. You'll have to at least prepare 5 just to make sure that your code is working properly. So that's what it's trying to say here. Um, Idle shell, we're not using a shell. Ensure a break signal reaches the right me. Yes. All right. Um, all right. So I'll leave this one as an assignment, maybe. Um, but first, I think this is actually the end. Yeah. Chapter summary. Yeah. So this is the last part. Um, 4:30. Okay. So I'll give you guys an assignment, but only after discussing for a little bit functions. All right, so let's go to this one, but I'll just put it here just to be safe. I won't forget it. So I'll put it near the end. All right, so these are your assignment. So this is a bit harder than before. Okay, again, use all the resources that you have. Okay, you can Google the answers. That's completely fine with me, as long as you understand. Okay, because I'm gonna have to let you explain it afterwards. Okay, the important thing here, right? I'm not grading you on this. It really just depends on you, right? If you're, you know, trying to cheat yourself, okay, don't do that. You're in this course, right? You're trying to learn, so try to do it in the correct way. Um, so this is the first one, simple calculator. All right. Next one is a, let's see, which one do I have here? All right. I'm gonna try and give you this one. Okay, don't worry, I'll give you an example of how this game works. And then this one, right? All right. So, yeah. So this is your first assignment. Simple calculator. Create a basic calculator that allows the user to perform addition, subtraction, multiplication, division operations on two numbers. So use a while loop to let the user perform multiple calculations. You can also say that, uh, let's see. Hmm, You can try and if user enters the letter Q, it will stop the program. All right. Mhm. All right, so just focus on two numbers for now. Don't make it too difficult. It's up to you if you want to ask the user for the two numbers. Actually, you should ask the user for the two numbers, right? Because this is a calculator. And then just focus on the basic operations, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Okay. So for this one, you're gonna be making use of course, the while loop. Um, Inputs, ints, and floats. Okay, if you want floats, all right, or if you want ints, I leave it up to you guys. You're gonna be making use of if statements, elifs, and else. You're gonna be making use of continue statements and what else? Prints, of course, and yeah. So you're gonna have to figure out how are you gonna detect addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division from the user. Okay. So yeah, because aside from numbers here, right, we're checking if number is equals to this number, right? But you can actually use it to check for strings. Like if letter is equals to Q, for example, right? That's what you will do for the letter Q here. Okay, so that's a clue. Um, the number checker game. Create a game where the user has to guess a randomly generated number. If it is odd or even, use a while to let the user perform multiple guesses or until they give up by typing Q on the input. So for example, so it doesn't have to be a randomly generated number. You can just type a number there that you want. And then for just for the sake of this game, right? And then let's just say that the user doesn't know the number that you gave your program, right? Because we're not going to be using um, imports yet, right? Then let's see. If your number is, say, for example, 50, right? And then you're gonna ask the user for a guess. Like if the user will guess, um, I actually forgot how this game work. Odd or even. I think I strongly remember if it is odd or even. Okay, so I think I need to modify this one a little bit. Um, let's just skip this one. All right, so just a multiplication table generator. So create a program that generates and displays a multiplication table for a user specified numbers. So for example, if I want a multiple multiplication table for the number 15. So you're gonna have to display there 15 times 1 up until 15 times 9, and then also the output, the corresponding output. So yeah, this is much more simpler than the calculator. All right. So yeah, these are your two assignments. I'll just put it here, okay, for now, because we're gonna proceed with the next PowerPoint. Um, let's see. Yes, only up till 9. Because there's no point in making it bigger. It's just the same thing, right? So let's just make it 0 to 9. So I'm gonna put it on the chat for everyone to see. Okay, if you don't want to download the lecture notes. So here it is. If you want to copy the assignments, it's in the chat. And then just send it to me via email as well, right? Okay, so hopefully by next week I can finish checking all of your assignments, including the one from last week. So yeah. Um, right. So let me open up this one. All right, so we have strings and text files. It says functions, but it's more about the functions related to text and strings. So yeah. Okay. So obviously we won't be able to finish this one, but that's okay. Substring. It's okay. So we'll be taking a closer look at strings in this section. Okay. So if you think about it, right? Um, a string is actually considered as a data structure. So what is a data structure? It's a collection of other data sources. Like in this case, it's primitive parts. So the primitive parts that it says here are the characters. So it can't be any lower than that. It's the character is the smallest um, string that you can create, right? Um, so primitive from the name itself, it's the fundamental or the very basic data types. Okay. So from here on out, you can actually create something else from these primitive data parts. Okay. So numbers, text, characters, I mean, and then Boolean values, they are primitive data types. Okay. Now, uh, it's showing us a len function. So the len function is just something that returns the length of whatever you put inside there. Okay, not just strings, but it will work for lists as well, as we will see later on. But again, let's focus on strings first. So as you can see, len of hi there, it's 9 characters because as you see here below, if you count it out one by one, 1, 2, space, 3, 4, 5, including the space, it's 6, 7, 8, and then including the exclamation point, it's 9. That's why we have 9. Len of a blank character, right? Blank string, it's 0 because there's nothing in it. Okay. So it's a data structure because it consists of a sequence of characters, right? And the one that you see here below, okay. Um, This is a representation of each character and their positions as indicated here. So you might be confused why it's starting at 0. So there's a very specific reason why it's counting at 0 in the beginning. Okay. Um, Other than characters, numbers, Boolean values, um, for numbers, it's both types of numbers. Okay, integers and floats. They are primitive. We also have the values of null. All right. So we have null. Null is a value. None. Yeah, none. And then what else? Hmm, actually, I don't have this memorized, but you can just do a quick Google search on this and then look for primitive parts in Python, and then it should just give you a list of what those things are. Okay. Um, so let's see. Starting from the very left of the string, it will always start at 0, and then steps of 1, it will increase towards the right. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. So the longer the string, the longer the number. Okay. And it is always, right? The last number is always 1 less than the length. Okay. So the length here is how many characters. This is indicating the position. It's not indicating how many characters, okay? So don't get confused. This is the position. This is how many characters there are in a string, okay? So let's go to the next part. Okay, knowing the position is actually important when you are trying to get the characters, okay? So this is the basic syntax of a subscript operator, okay? So the subscript operator, this is a general term, but this is you trying to access a certain part of a data structure, okay? This is not just limited to strings, okay? Again, this is you trying to access a certain part of a data structure. Now, we have some examples here, right? Okay. Mm, if we say, right, uh, name, let's see, say no, right? Excuse. If you say name, right, and then actually we can't see it. Oh, it will display the output. Name of 0, right? It will display the letter D because that is where 0 starts. If I say 5, it will display L because that is where position 5 is. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Um, if you, so that's us accessing individual characters, right? What if you're trying to access, let's say a range of characters? Let's say if this is my full name, right? And I want to access what the last name only, then you can say that this is 5, right? So this starts at 6. Okay, 6 up until what? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is 10. So how do you do that? You use a colon and then the next number. So starting point, colon, ending point, right? Run the code, and then it doesn't work. Why? Because, why? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so it's not including 10. You have to use 11. There you go. Okay, now a shortcut version of this one is to remove the second one altogether and then just leave the colon. So that is a shortcut that's saying starting from 6 up until to the end, I want you to get that string. So as you can see, it's still the same thing. If you do it in reverse, like the one on the left is blank, and then you have a number on the right, let's say 5, it will start at um, the very beginning and then ends at that specific position, which is 5. So this is wrong. It should be 6 because it's not included. All right. So 6. Internet connection unstable. Can everyone still see my video, hear my audio? Is everything good? Yes, okay. So I got a notification that my internet is unstable. So just trying to make sure. Okay. Thank you for that, Sir Dimpy. All right, so that's how you access strings. Now, at this point, this is the part where it's easier to uh, segregate different parts of the string. Let's go back to the example that I shared earlier, like the date. So 01 dash 05 dash 2025. So if this is the format that you get from the sources for your data, right? And you want to get the month, the day, and the year, then it's actually very easy using the positions. So you're going to say that the month is equals to what? Let's use this one as date. Okay, so this is date, and then starting from 0 up until 1, right? And then day is equals to what? Date of 01 to starting from 3, 4, and then ends at 5. And then year is equals to what? Date of 02, 01, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, starting at 6 up until to the end. And that's my month, day, and year. And if I will print this one out, month, day, and then year, I will have that. This is wrong. There should be 2. There you go. So I have month, day, and year. And um I can even go further, right? And say convert it into a number. So int, right? I'm gonna put int here because I want it to be converted into a number. All right. Okay, now I have 1, 5, and 2025, right? Next, I can even convert it even further to say that if month is equals to 1, right? It will be equal to January, right? So it will be equal to month is equals to January. So in this case, I'm changing the value of month, right? So if I were to run this code again, let's see. Okay, sorry. It's reading it as a variable. There you go. So now I converted this one into this output, January 5, 2025. All right. You can even save this one in a, uh, let's say you can save this one in a string format. So let's say converted, converted date is equals to month plus str, right? Because we converted it to int to remove the 0, and then we're going to convert it back to string because we're adding it as a string using concatenation, right? And then string of year, right? What else do we need to add? We need to add what? Since we're using concatenation, we need to add some spaces, I think. Okay, something like that. Let me copy this one actually. Okay, put it here, here, and then we need to add what, a comma here. This way. converted state. All right, so now it's in a more proper format and it's stored in the converted state variable. So this is how you make use of substrings. Okay, you're trying to convert your data into something else. Okay, let's say in some cases the data that you get from your sources is not segregated properly. So sometimes it could look something like this. Data could look something like name, colon, Daniel, and then semicolon, and then last name, colon, and then last name. Sometimes it could look like this, right? So this is actually much more tricky to do. Um, but there's a way to do it, and we'll discuss that one as well. Okay. Um, let's see. We'll do this one maybe next time. I'm just giving you an intro on how to do substrate. Let's see. Can you use loops on strings? Yes, because that's what we did, right? We did a for loop for strings, and then it showed us each character on that string. Um, so yeah. You can put this logic inside there where you're checking the dates, right? And then let's say you want to stop checking the dates if it's equal to January or February, or you want to do something specific, right? So you can use substrings on that in this case because you already know that in those positions it will always be the month, right? I hope that's clear. Negative. So basically it will just go to the last character. Okay, but it's still gonna count towards the left towards the right, right? Um, so where's my other example earlier? Okay. Name of thing, right? Okay, so if you say name of um negative 0, 1, 2, and then up to the end, the output is NIEL. Oh no, EL. -2. So -1, -2, yeah, yeah. So starting from E, it will go directly to the end. This is the same as saying name is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 towards the end if you're using a positive number. So if we disable this one temporarily, as you can see, the output is still the same, okay? So just because it starts at the ending part of the string, it will read it in reverse. No, it will still read it from left to right. Okay. Um, let's see. So this is basically the same as what I showed you earlier. It's using a combination of functions, right? Range and len. Basically what you're trying to say is access the whole string, range of len data. And then instead of giving out each letter, it's gonna give out what? What is the range output? It will give you a sequence of numbers. So it, the index here are the positions for each character. That's what it will do. And then if you access it using that variable index, you can show it this way. So index and then data index. So that's why it has this kind of output here. Okay. So don't get too confused just because it's a combination of functions. Okay. Len data, len will give out what? how many characters there are. So it's a number. So if you convert that into a number, so len data, right? This is what? 9. So it will become range of 9. So that's why it will output 0 to 8. Your values for index will be from 0 to 8. Then you're making use of the index variable by using a subscript operator, okay, and then accessing the data variable. So data variable, and then placing the index variable inside there as a subscript. Um, that's why you will get the character for each of those index numbers, okay? So don't get confused with this one. It's really straightforward. It looks confusing because it's using words rather than numbers. But if you exchange the words with numbers, right, with their equivalent values, then it's actually much clearer. So if it's harder to understand the code, it's always good if you write it down in terms of numbers. Okay. Give give it some give it specific values at first and then try to see where it goes. How does the data, how does the program flow from that point on? So that's always helpful in my case. Let's see, what next? Slicing. So yeah, this is what we did earlier. Testing for a string. Okay, so this is actually good. The in operator. So this is when you are trying to check if a specific substring or yeah, if a specific substring is inside of another string. Okay, so let's say for example, like this, right? Um, let's say, let's say that because this is too simple, let's think of something else. Um, let's say you are dealing with your data is about serial numbers, right? And then for serial numbers, for example, SRN 9994567. And then there's a certain code at the end that says INV for invalids. And then um, if it's not present, then of course it's valid. So in this case, you are trying to check if that serial number has the INV at the end. Okay, so this is what you do. You're going to use the if, okay, if control structure. Then you're going to check if data, no, wait, if um, INV in data, right? Then you're going to print out invalid. Okay. So since INV, the substring INV, that exact sequence is present in data, right? This entire thing here will become true, and then it will execute the code inside of the if statement here. So that's why it will print out invalid. All right, so this is very useful when you're trying to check something if a certain substring is present in another substring. So there are a lot of use cases in this one, okay? So this is a special operator, the in operator, all right? So this is a separate in from the for loop, okay? Because for the for loop, it's used for accessing individual items, right? It's a different in if it's used in the if statements, right? So in this case, in this example, is trying to identify which files are having the .txt at the end. So it's very useful for um, filtering out which file names fit the one that you're looking for. So if you're just looking for text files, it will just give you a list of the text files that you want, right? Data encryption. I think we'll stop here for today. Besides, it's almost 5. Okay. So the last 5 minutes, let's have it for questions like any part where you are confused or you want some clarifications before we end. So was the discussion clear? Alright. So I think this batch is full of geniuses. So if I were to, let's see. So if I were to give you a quiz, right? If this was school, if I were to give you a quiz, you'd get a perfect score, right? All right. So that's okay. Let's just take it easy, right? We're trying to learn because we want to um, use our knowledge for improving ourselves, right? Whether it's um, getting a new position or getting a job or as a hobby. Okay. Right. So if there are no questions, then we can end it now. Remember your assignment. Just send it to me via email. And I'm gonna upload the video, if not tomorrow, by Monday. And then I'll also upload the lecture notes on the LMS as well. Okay. And that's it. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys next week. All right. Goodbye.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.